Well, I can hear you when I unplug my microphone. So the problem is, oh, you know what the problem is? That my headphones are not plugged into my microphone.
Oh, honey, honey.
We're off to a strong start. Okay.
Hi.
How are you?
Well, I'm good. I mean, I'm not sure. You can kind of probably
I
not.
see maybe the outline of a kitten, maybe basking in some sun.
She's just purring. She's just they're so happy. And the other ones. So my only caveat is that I don't know. I don't know what's gonna happen. We might have to edit some stuff out.
Oh,
May wake up and just be like wild because kittens, man.
that's
Kittens.
fine. But also, like, the stuff that you would think you have to edit out is oftentimes the most entertaining stuff.
Truth.
You know,
I love
I
your
let
hair.
my dog just be in the podcast sometimes. Thank you. I've been changing my hair color maybe every 4 weeks for the past like 6 months. And this one is staying. This orange is doing it for me. And it's also on brand with the new branding. So I'm just like going with it. The first thing that I wanted to say to you was it is so funny how we ended up talking because I had been for a month. I had a list of people who I was like, I'm going to reach out to these people and ask them to be contributors for this new platform that I'm working on. And I was like, it's going to be great. And people are going to, there's so much in this story as I'm saying it. I'm like, oh man, there's like so much in the story, but it's going to be great because I'm going to be the person who gets to show up in people's inbox and be like, hey, do you want to come on a podcast? Do you want me to like feature your work on this thing? And like, you know, at least I spend a whole bunch of time looking for opportunities like that. So I was like, I'll be the person who gets to show up in people's inbox and ask them, you know, and offer this until the time came to actually do it. And I was like, I don't want to bother anybody. I'm asking people to do work for me. I can't reach out to these people. I can't just like ask that. Like, they're going to be like, who do you think that you are? Like, no, I don't want anything to do. What? No, this is just like too much. And you were on that list, by the way. Obviously, because every single time that anyone says the words imposter syndrome is what they usually say. I'm like, actually, I use the term imposter complex because Tanya Geisler says, blah, 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 you need to go to her website and you need to look at like her articles that she has there. It's like, you know, and you're just like my go-to person that I always bring up when I talk about that. So why would I not ask you to be one of the first contributors? But did I? No, I didn't. And then I was on Facebook, which I almost never go on. And actually, the only reason I'm on there is because there's one Facebook group I'm a part of, and it has just moved off of Facebook. So I get to delete that account again. But luckily I didn't, because I went on Facebook and I saw you say, do you have a podcast that you want me to be on? And then you were talking about how like one of the central parts of your work is saying like your people want to help. And I was like, oh my gosh. And it was on the day that I was like, reach out to these contributors. And it just was right there. So I couldn't, I mean, at that point, I couldn't not. And it was like my doorway. It was my window of opportunity to say, Tanya Geisler, as somebody who I have looked up to for so long and heard you speaking even before I left my full-time job and even started doing the work that I do. I don't know. I get to like, just hang out with you and talk to you and like have you on my podcast and ask you whatever I want. It's just wild to me. So.
Bless. And I'm so honored that you were a big effusive. Can we do this? And I'm also, you know, I am going to pat myself on the back. I'm going to go ahead and just, that was so smart of me to do. That was so smart of me to do, you know, sitting inside of this. I have had, I don't know how many conversations in the last couple of weeks in the pits of doing a bunch of crap I didn't want to be doing. And I have a lot of really smart people around saying, well, what do you want to be doing? I want to be having great conversations. I want to be on more podcasts. I want, you know, and then it was like, well, and what are you doing about that, TG? Oh, maybe I should probably ask. And I did. And my calendar has been filled with these incredible conversations. And I'm just,
of course.
So I am absolutely celebrating that, following that. And I'm just delighted and honored. It was so good. Just, y'all remember to ask. Just remember to ask.
Yeah. And
Just
so many
remember to ask.
people,
You're
I know I'm
right.
not the only one who was waiting for Tanya Geisler to be like, hey, you have a podcast I want to be on? Like, of course your calendar is filling up with great conversations because everyone's like, yes, I do. Come and talk to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the reasons why you were such an obvious person for me to want to have on the show, which you were on my other podcast years ago at this point. And it was so fun and so informative. And I've sent people back to that episode a bunch of times, but I also, I wanted to have you back again because not everybody is going to go back and listen to that episode. Not everybody is going to go and listen to all of the conversations that you have done before. And I want to like push this in front of people one more time because I was telling you, like, it's so, it's something that I come back to all the time as somebody who is like, I mean, all of us, I think, but every single time that I have a new idea, there's the imposter complex element of it. And there's some things that you teach that to me, I'm just like, yeah, I just know this now. And so even if I don't believe it, and even if I am in one of those days where I'm like really talking shit to myself, I can be like, okay, but here's what we know is true about imposter complex. And I can just like kind of rest on that for a moment. And I'd love to get into some of those things with you first, because people really, really, really need to hear it. So I think the place to start is like, I'd love for you to walk us through, or, you don't have to walk us through, but we can start the conversation with, if someone is coming up against imposter complex really hard and it's really loud, like, what are some of the things that we can maybe guess might be going on for that person or might be true for that person that are causing this to come up?
I had this problem over the weekend when somebody was like, I've been following your work, but like, exactly what is imposter complex? And I was like, oh God, how long is this piece of string? I don't know what to say. So the first thing I will say is, when you said, like, what do we know about this person who's coming up against the imposter complex? What we know is that this person is human. We know that this person has beautiful values of excellence and integrity and proficiency. Right? That's what we already know about this person. We also know that they are on the precipice of doing something that is meaningful and that matters. Okay. So that's what we already know. If you're experiencing this, you are at an edge and you want to do things really beautifully well because this thing matters to you. So you are also a human. So those are the first things that we absolutely understand to be true. The imposter complex wants to keep you out of action. It wants to have you doubt your capacity, and it wants to keep you alone and isolated. Sometimes all three à la fois, and sometimes it will it'll pick one or the other. So for that person, that's really where we begin is, well, what's actually going on here? Is it trying to keep you out of action by telling you don't know what you're doing? And you actually named it. You named it in a couple of different times, in a couple of different ways when you were creating this new, extraordinarily important to you platform. You are already in the place of, who am I to? And what will they think? You didn't actually say that, but that's what I heard. And those are, hallmark characteristics or hallmark questions that the imposter complex is going to show up with. So that's what we know about the person right out of the gate, that this matters. I say this all the time. I don't experience the imposter complex in my yoga practice. I don't experience it in, even in my cooking. Those are things that I enjoy, but they're not deeply ensconced in my sense of identity or my sense of purpose and place on this earth, right? But holy doodle, is it going to show up in my parenting and my speaking and my teaching and my writing? That's where it's going to show up.
Yeah. And those are things that I am so grateful for Tiffany Hahn for being the person who introduced me to your work. And I think that, and so many other people, right? It's just it was so pivotal for me to start to kind of discover people like you, like Tiffany, like Lena West, like people who I've met kind of through just like, I landed on a podcast one day, these conversations came up and I was just like, oh my gosh, like I've never heard anyone put it this way. And it just really changed the trajectory of my life. Like it really, really did. I mean, my memory of listening to you for the first time, now I'm going down like a story hole, but there's something that I actually wanted to say about that. It was walking to my nonprofit job in Buffalo, because I lived in Buffalo at the time, with my big like Sorel boots on and like going through like the sludge down the stairs to go and walk to the office, and hearing you, I think it was an interview that you did on Tiffany's podcast for the first time. Like I still remember it because despite the fact that, and I am married to an academic, and so people in academia talk about imposter syndrome all the time, that they have imposter syndrome, despite the fact that I have heard a million conversations about imposter syndrome, I had never one time heard someone say, hey, if you're experiencing this, it probably means that this really matters to you and you really want to do a good job and you're really conscientious and like care about the people who are, you know, who you're doing this for. And actually, like, this is a totally normal thing.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. 100%. And we want to make ourselves so wrong for it. We want to make ourselves so wrong. I love what you were saying. I love that visual, by the way. I love the Sorel boots. Boy, do I know that. I'm in Toronto. So you know, I know the sludge. You know, I know what that February 27th day is like.
Yeah.
And by the way, I give thanks for Tiffany Hahn every single day myself. In fact, she was just texting me about something else today. What I think is really valuable for people to know about me and my work is that I'm not here to eradicate imposter complex. Can't be done. But what I want people to have is that faster recovery, or the way you named it. You know, I'd like just coming back to remembering what I know. So I want that to be ingrained in people's understanding about what's going on for them. And you've mentioned imposter syndrome a couple of times. Is it fruitful to share with folks why?
I was going there next, so go there.
Of course you are. So imposter syndrome is how this experience is largely known, mostly because of a book written by Valerie Young a couple of decades back, where she named it as imposter syndrome. The clinical psychologist who identified this experience named it as imposter phenomenon. And I think that that's a really important distinction for me, because syndrome speaks into it being a clinical diagnosis. It suggests that there's a clinical diagnosis to this. That's typically what a syndrome will mean. And so for folks who have diagnoses that are syndromes, you'll understand why that matters, and words definitely matter to me. So I don't want to co-opt medical terms. Also, it really pathologizes what is otherwise a really typical kind of life experience that we all come up against. So that's really important. Now, I say this all the time, it's getting a little bit tired, but it still remains the truth. My SEO people are so pissed at me that I continue to use imposter complex, because that's not what people are Googling. But still, you know, again, words really, really do matter to me. And also I, you know, as my coach and friend Desiree always reminds me, this stuff's complex, right? So the idea, whether Jung would agree with me or not, if it's actually complex, I really like that reminder. It's very, very layered. It's very nuanced, and we all experience this in extremely different ways. I think this is the other challenge that we can have here, is when we talk about imposter complex or syndrome, we do like to look at it as a sort of a one size fits all experience, and it ain't that. It's very, very complex. And you know, I talk about it from the lens of my lived experience as a white, neurotypical, able-bodied woman of middle-class means living in North America. That is not everybody else's truth. That is not everybody else's experience. And so we're going to experience it differently. Part of my work is to flatten it and say, okay, we are coming at this from different places. We are showing up with different coping mechanisms because of how we've been conditioned, because of how we've been socialized, because of how we've been systemically excluded. So we're going to have a different experience with this. And so that naming of complex invites a little more care, I think, as we have this conversation.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things that I really appreciate about the intentionality behind the term that you use there is that, at least prior to hearing you speak on imposter complex, I was always hearing people talk about it in terms of, this is a problem that I have and it's a me thing and I need to figure out how to deal with this. And what I learned through your work, because also what I will say is that I know that you're not doing the podcast anymore, but you did have a podcast, Ready Enough, which is still there, everybody. And the conversations are still awesome. And what I really, really loved about and love about that podcast is that you were sort of going at things from the angle of like, okay, there's imposter complex, but there's also all of these other systemic things or all these other external things that feed into this as well. Like, let's have a conversation about this. You weren't trying to do the thing that so often happens on the internet, where we want to like way simplify and make everything about that thing, because then that leads people to thinking that you're the ultimate source on all of the things, which is like what we're taught to do. When actually, like, there's so much complexity to this. And I really appreciate that. And I really appreciate the conversations around, like, or at least what I took from some of the conversations that you had around, what would it mean if you were really to just like get rid of this thing within you? Because that would mean that you actually wouldn't have that really strong value of integrity or excellence. Like, that would mean that actually you would be going about things with maybe a little bit less care or a little bit less like thoughtfulness. And right. And so like, this is a thing that when you know what it is, and I do think it's helpful to name things to know what they are, you can work with it. But if you don't know what it is and you think that it's your fault and you're trying to get rid of it, you're actually moving in the wrong direction.
Exactly. I read a quote in one of my clients' Miro boards. They'll send me their mind maps of like all the stuff. There's some quotes like, if that, and it's, I can't remember who the quote's. So I'm just going to do that thing where let me know who said this quote, but it's basically like, if a captain's job is to preserve the ship, it'll never leave the harbor. Right? That's not the point. We're trying to swing out. We're trying to do things. We got like we got systems to heal and decisions to make and things to disrupt. We can't just sort of stay in this like, like I can't do this thing. Lena West, I loved this so much. She talks about, specifically my work, but really, I guess it's this work when we start to name and understand what's actually going on. She said this work is like a Formula One racing suit. So, which is such an interesting metaphor for me, like as a complete non-racer, but I'm like, I get it. So it's not going to, you're still going to have to hug the turns and you're still going to have to, presumably that's how racing works. It might not even protect you from some of the skids that you're going to have, but it's going to protect you. Like once you know that you have the suit that is made so perfectly designed for you, you are going to be okay when you skid out or when you do whatever it is that you do in Formula One racing. It's a great metaphor that I still don't really understand, but I get the suit analogy, right?
Yeah.
So it's like it's not going to stop you from it. Like it's going to protect as you are doing these big world-changing, disrupting things, and that's what it's about. That's what it's about.
Yeah, and the discomfort of doing that, of like stepping out and being like, I'm going to take a risk and do my best in this area that really matters to me. Like that's going to be uncomfortable.
It's going to be uncomfortable. There might be some skids, but like, so how do you gear up? How do you make sure that you are as protected as you can possibly be?
Yeah. Yeah. I am feeling like I need to reel myself in a bit and, come back to some of the basic things that to me might seem very obvious. But I think it might be helpful to really spell out for people who are listening, like you were saying, like, you know, the imposter complex wants to keep you doubting your capacity, alone and isolated, and out of action. Yes. And so when you say that, like, what comes up for me is just like, this is like kind of a mechanism of your, this is like a mechanism that you are in some capacity, like using to like stay safe.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So why make ourselves wrong for that? The other thing too, yes, we're going to go back to that because I probably want to talk about some strategies. We probably want to talk about the coping mechanisms because those are usually the things that are bringing people to me, to my work, and in this conversation.
Let's do it.
But I want to say that, you know, you mentioned something about how we have this experience and we want to make ourselves wrong for it. We think there's something wrong with us and we want to be fixed. You will also notice in the ethers of conversation in and around imposter complex, there's a brilliant article written by the Harvard Business Review. And you know what, I'm going to make sure that we have a link to that. It's a really brilliant article written by two women of color talking about stop telling women that they experience imposter syndrome. And I could not agree more in so many different realms, because typically this is used as there is something wrong with you. You don't have enough confidence. You aren't speaking up enough, largely in a corporate environment. But really what's happening is folks feel like they don't have the institutional ground cover to protect them when they actually do raise their hand, when they do swing out. So it has been used as a way of gaslighting people. So I think, again, the complexity is, so it becomes a you problem, not a, hey, how are we actually supporting folks? How are we actually making sure that their voices are heard, that there is a culture of belonging here? And so that can be, you know, another place that we push up against in this conversation. So further to gaslighting, the way we're going to, we don't want to feel like the imposter, right? We don't want to feel like that. It's a terrible feeling. We feel like, you know, everybody's in on some kind of secret and we're just on the outside. And the imposter complex is absolutely obsessed with how we are belonging or not belonging. So it's the reason we fear success as much as we fear failure. On both ends of the spectrum, we are othered from the sort of the core group, right? So we don't want to feel like that. So that means that we rein it in a little bit. So we're going to hide out in specific behaviors that, again, have been conditioned or are instruments of safety for those who have been systemically excluded or marginalized. So this means that we're going to go to perfectionism, which we think our perfectionism is going to save us. We'll go to procrastination to avoid feeling like the imposter, right? Like like if I don't have to do the thing, nobody's going to find out I don't belong here. We'll go to diminishment, where I can dim my light and not be on anybody's radar. Where we go to comparison to see how we're stacking up. We're going to use our people pleasing, and we're going to have leaky boundaries. Oh, again, all the time, à la fois. We'd never get out of bed if that were the case. But we all have our typical kind of go-to ways of trying to avoid feeling like the imposter. Add in one more layer of complexity here. And when we go to these behaviors to avoid feeling like the imposter, we actually feel more like the imposter. So here's how that works.
Yeah, let's break it down for us, because I've had this experience before and I can't wait.
So as a people pleaser, so I want to make sure that everybody likes me. I want to make sure that everybody likes me, and then I'm gonna know that I belong, that I know that I fit in, I know that I'm supposed to be here. Nobody made a mistake. I belong. But if I'm using my charm and my likability like I've been taught, when I get offered another opportunity, I'll think, well, they're just being nice. They just like me. I'm not being invited because I'm deeply skilled, talented, and brilliant at what I do. They just like me. So that has me feeling more like the imposter. So it's this double-edged arrow. This double arrow? Yes, that's what I want to say. It's double arrow, right? It gets us coming and going. Our perfectionism, right? We think that we want to make sure that our work is above reproach, right? So we are going to work so hard and so diligently to make sure that absolutely every I is dotted, every T is crossed. We are going to work so bloody hard. And then we look up and realize, oh, wait a minute, nobody else has to work as hard as me. Clearly, I don't belong.
Mm-hmm.
This is coming and going.
Mm-hmm.
And trust when I tell you that it's the same for every last aspect. In comparison, we go to comparison, but in so doing, we actually feel more like the imposter. We go to procrastination, we feel more like the imposter. Each and every one of these behavioral traits. So it feels relentless and it feels futile, right?
Mm-hmm.
We go, our coping mechanism is actually exacerbating the challenge. So this is another place we're going to make ourselves so wrong, and we're going to go to, we're going to pick up the book on how to stop procrastinating and just be more confident, damn it, and stop being such a people pleaser. Snap, slap, 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 slap.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is, there's deep wisdom here.
Yeah.
There's something incredibly valuable that sits here. And the self-development space is a $42 billion industry, which is a ton of money invested in making sure that people feel like shit about themselves. So what I much prefer people do is look at the sort of conditions that fostered my people pleasing. Yes, it was how I was conditioned. It was how I was raised. It's how I was praised. All of that is true. And it also underscores my exquisite value of inclusivity. I am 0% interested in not amplifying that. I am 0% interested in that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not interested in the way that when I over-identify with my people pleasing, it keeps me out of action, doubting in my capacity, and alone and isolated. That's when it becomes tricky.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're somebody who goes to people pleasing as a kind of a natural set point, I want you to celebrate your value of inclusivity. If you have leaky boundaries, I want you to celebrate the fact that you are deeply generous.
Mm-hmm.
That if you have, if you're somebody who tends to compare, you've got a gorgeous value of connection that is not to be trifled with. If you diminish, it probably has a lot to do with your humility. If you are a procrastinator, then this has everything to do with your value of discernment. And that perfectionism has everything to do with your value of excellence.
Mm.
And I talk about leadership a lot. And when I think about that set of values, discernment, connection, excellence, generosity, inclusivity, right? Like that's the world I want to live in.
Mm-hmm.
So why are we making ourselves wrong for these aspects of ourselves when we really need to amplify them?
Yeah. Yeah. It's brilliant. And what I immediately go to as I hear you kind of lay all of that out is if we, the people who tends to go there because we have those values, are not the ones who endure the discomfort of kind of swinging out and creating a change and disrupting some things and potentially or definitely screwing up and then being like, all right, but that doesn't, like that's a human thing. Then who does? Yep. It's the people who don't have those values or who their interest in feeling important or making things work in a way that works for them and people like them. Those are their values that are steering the ship. And it's like, there's like no choice but to not allow those to be the only people who are, at the forefront of things.
That's right. And you mentioned a little bit before, you were talking about, if we eradicate the imposter complex, and what does that look like? Well, what it looks like is a lot of people walking around with the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is the complete opposite, which is where you have tons of confidence, but very, very few data points of your excellence and your ability, right? Mm-hmm. The imposter complex that's the inverse. So not at all interested in that. Not at all interested.
Yeah.
One bit. No.
Yeah. And the other piece of this too, that keeps coming up as you're talking, and I think is really related to this, and anybody who's listened to any of my other pieces of content that I've done is probably so sick of hearing me talk about it, is Carol Dweck's work on growth mindset and how actually like you get better at things by making mistakes and struggling through, like putting in effort You don't know what you're doing at first. You have all of this confidence. Then you start putting in the effort. You start learning what you didn't know before. And it feels like you have no idea what you're doing because you're actually becoming more aware of what you didn't know before. And that's what learning is like. You like mess things up and you realize you have no idea how to do a thing. And then that points you toward what you need to learn how to do. And you misstep through it. And right. And it feels like imposter complex, like one of the lies of it is that like you should somehow just come out of the gate like with your fully capable of like just doing your life's work, like creating this masterpiece right now, which is like obviously not the way that it's ever going to work. Like there's no space.
Has never worked that way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and by the way, just
Yeah.
because our listeners heard it, so I'm just going to underscore it and pull it back. Nobody's sick of hearing you talk about Carol Dweck's work.
Oh, thank you.
Nobody. Because we love hearing it through the lens of your perspective and your big, beautiful brain. We can all read her work, some of us might, but we love hearing it through your perspective.
Thank you.
That's how we
Thank you for saying that. You know, this weekend I was talking to a very close friend of mine, and they said, I don't even remember how it came up, but they were saying something about the some of the things that I've been working on and how they've really loved like how close we've been at this phase of both of our lives, because it's allowed each of us to kind of witness the other one do really big shit, you know? And I was like, yeah, I feel like I have so much to say right now about like how risky it is to just create something, but I'm like so in the experience that I'm just not really like even talking about that with people, because I'm just like, I'm trying to just create the thing. I'm just like, I don't have time to talk about it right now. I just need to like do it. And they were like, you need to be writing about this. And I was like, oh, I write about it all the time. I just never post it because after I write it, I'm just like, everyone already knows that. And they were like, yeah, no, that's not true. Not everyone already knows that. And even if some people do know it, like they need to hear you say it. Well, we had that conversation, I think on like Thursday. On Saturday, I wrote this whole big thing. Ask me where it is. It's in my notes app. Why? Because when I got to the end of it, I was like, Brene Brown already wrote this. Whatever. No one needs to hear this. Now you're saying this. And I'm like, it's already there. Literally, all I would need to do is just copy it and paste it somewhere. Like, I don't know, even send it to a few of my friends. Like, it doesn't even need to be content necessarily, right? But just saying it and sharing it with people. Yeah, there's just always that voice that's like, no one really needs to hear that from you. Someone's already done it, you know? It's just so interesting.
That's line number 4 of the imposter complex, of which there are 12. You have nothing useful, original, or valuable to say, which is when we believe this lie, we say nothing. We pass up opportunities for collaboration. We pass up opportunities to share our brilliant shit with the world. This is probably, nope, can't pick a favorite. There are 12 fantastic lies. All are deeply compelling, but there is absolutely nothing new under the sun. There really isn't. There literally is nothing new under the sun.
Yeah.
This isn't.
Yeah.
But we have not heard through the lens of your lived experience, with your brilliant flavors. We all will always remember you walking in your sorrels. Like those are the ways that we have the wisdom imprinted through your experience. I'm going to tell you something straight up, like this, that to me is the Oprah effect. For me, 100% the Oprah effect. When you hear back in the day, when she was interviewing folks, it wasn't, I wasn't super interested in what Deepak Chopra had to say. Come for me, I don't care. But I was really interested to hear what he had to say through the hopper of her experience, the hopper of her wisdom and how she saw the world, I think that was one of the things that's the most compelling. She would take these concepts and would she be able to bring them down in a way that really just made sense. The other thing I want to say is I'm celebrating you in that friendship. I'm celebrating you and that person that you have in your life, because such a huge part of this work for me, you named the 3 things that the imposter complex wants to keep you out of action, doubting your capacity, and alone and isolated, the strategies are really specific. And of course, for if it wants to keep you alone and isolated, your job is to assemble your cast, right? Like really make sure you're surrounded by some really, really good folks. Now, I just don't mean folks who are just constantly in agreement with you, but that can provide you conscious critique. And that is a huge piece. I think so many of us tend to struggle with. So when there is something easeful in relationships, I really want to put a spotlight on that so you can see that's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah, it's true. And honestly, I mean, it's been so game changing for me to realize like the people who I really want to be spending time with, to the point that it's a huge part of the reason why I've kind of pivoted in my own business, because one of the things that I really want to do, and one of the things that we're going to start doing in fruition, is having free, open to anybody calls with the intention of like, if you need to find like accountability partners, mastermind buddies, like people you want to collaborate or something with or something, like come in and helping people connect with those people, because you do not need to always, sometimes you do need to pay to be in a space, to be surrounded by the people that you want to be surrounded by. But sometimes it's a matter of being like, you know what? I just need to set a time aside to be with these people regularly and make it a point to not shy away from talking about the things that I'm doing. Like make it a mastermind, so to speak, where you're making it a point where everyone's talking about the things that they're working on and sharing that with each other. Like, and I think that we've gotten to a point now where it feels like there's a program for everything, and you always need to join a thing in order to be working on something. And that can be really helpful for people. But also, if you don't have the resources to do that, or if you already have people in your orbit who you know would be really mutually beneficial for the two of you to do that yourselves, like do it yourselves. It's been huge for me. So, and I do pay to be in space as well, but it brings something different.
Absolutely. I do think that sometimes folks struggle to find those people.
Yeah.
And so going into something that is a bit more curated and organized, it's like I'll be able to step in and I'll know that my people are going to be here. There's so much wounding in and around finding your people. We've all had experiences where we've not been met, where we felt let down, where we've not been, folks won't rise up to meet us. There's so much pain that sits inside here.
Yeah.
So again, I want to celebrate that you have some of those folks.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I have a couple of questions for you about you and your experience rather than about imposter complex. And the first one is one that I've been so curious about, which is you are it seems that you're doing lots of speaking engagements and you are like an excellent speaker and people love having you speak at their events. And I'm curious about how you started with the speaking, and if that was like something that I think it's something that you always wanted to do, because I think that you have this like presence of being on a stage that just seems like there's no possible way that it was like, just something that happened. But I would love to hear a little bit about that.
I have always loved the stage, love the stage, but not the theater necessarily, not the theater necessarily, but I've always loved if you've ever worked with a coach, you know that they're going to do a peak experience moment. And my peak experience moment was when I was 17, running for student council. And I did the whole thing in full on Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure vibe. Oh yeah, it was something. But really, when I think about that peak experience, what that brought me was an understanding of joy. I really felt so much joy. I felt connecting. I felt generous with my humor. I felt grateful for the opportunity. So all of this was just this really beautiful culmination. So I've always wanted to come back there. And so having impact in a pretty large way was so, that was a very indelible moment. And, I did do a little bit of theater, mostly like Moliere plays in university kind of thing. And I just loved all of it. I loved the impact. I loved how people felt and responded. In my first corporate iteration, I would say, I was in advertising, and by far my favorite part was the pitches. I loved being able to hold something, so it wasn't just the entertainment, it was also, can I change people's minds? Can we look at this differently? Can we all of us see something a little bit differently? So when I looked at what I really wanted to do, and again, I too have cultivated good relationships, and it's been super important all along for me to make sure that I'm surrounded by people who are able to tell me the truth, who are able to offer conscious critique, and who are interested in watching me expand. So I've always had folks like that. And so they've been able to reflect back. Well, when I was trying to figure out what, doesn't matter the detail of it, but when I went through a bit of a career crisis and I was trying to figure out what I wanted next, that's what was reflected. Like, how do we get you on more stage? How do we get how do we get that for you? Because that's really where you come alive, and that is the truth of it. So it's always been part of what I've enjoyed doing, and I feel extraordinarily grateful that I have been given some great opportunities. I did a TEDx talk back in 2012. Lord. And that definitely opened up a lot of doors for me. But I think, largely when people see me somewhere, they will find other stages for me to be on. So I have been extremely lucky. That is the truth of it. I've been extremely lucky. I've been extremely fortunate. And I'm aware that can sound like diminishment. That is the truth. I can be absolutely grateful for the luck that I've had, and also know that, I show up. I've got a gig in Norway at the end of October, and I mean, that babe's in that's in the can. I have done it. I am working it. I'm running through my paces. So I work really hard on my craft. So interesting you said that. I'm actually creating a speaking checklist for folks who are interested and maybe don't know the questions to ask as they're going into discovery calls. So hopefully that'll be done by the time this is live, and I'll be happy to share that with y'all.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I would love to share that, because I know so many people want to be speaking, and like the thing that I see come up for a lot of folks is like getting that first kind of opportunity. Absolutely. Or the first few opportunities where you can then kind of show people, right, this is something that I do. And I'm glad that you brought up the TEDx talk, because I was actually curious. I was going to ask you about that, like what that process was like. I know one other person who has done a TEDx talk, who, by the way, to your point about like being lucky and fortunate, but also showing up, this person is not doing a whole bunch of speaking engagements coming off of that TEDx talk, because they would be totally okay with me saying this. They know that this is true. They're not like born to be on stage speaking. And they don't take it. That's not something that they take very seriously. And so for you, I mean, anybody who's watched you speak before, which I've watched the TEDx talk, everyone should go and watch it. It's like clear to me that people were like, oh yeah, let's find more stages for Tanya, But what was the TEDx talk process like? Like, because I know that there are people who are really interested in doing one of those one day. I'm curious if you have any insights to share.
What I will say is, once again, not dissimilar to this podcast, getting that invitation was an absolute testament to just asking. So like naming what it is you want. And so actually what's really magical, so Tara Sophia Moore was my client, and we were on a retreat weekend in Whidbey Island. So it was Tara, myself, Ronna Dietrich, Julie Daly, and a couple of other amazing humans. And we were speaking with Leanne Raymond. So Leanne, who, as it happened, had invited TEDx to her town of Comox. And so we were just in the conversation, and I said, I want more stage. I want more stage. I'm just naming that. I'm declaring it. It was a new moon situation. We did some spell casting. Oh, it was good. And through that would, like, we all got the invitation. We were like, yeah, yes, I'd love more stage 2. Let's make that happen. How do we make that happen? And then very shortly after, Leanne invited us all to come out, and we all shared the same stage together. It was extraordinary. But again, the power of asking, the power of clarity, and the power of asking. Right place, right time. You got to show up. And so, so it wasn't this like really elaborate application process that I know folks have to go through. I have applied for TEDx Toronto. Did not get a call back, just so y'all know. So, but it is, you just have to make sure that you're asking, make sure that you are clear about what it is that you want. And then in some ways, dog with a bone, that resilience, or that sort of, I would say that tenacity, having some tenacity. But I was not going to, I was going to keep asking and asking and asking and asking and asking until I made it happen. So that's what I highly recommend. Then the process itself, I mean, it's like any other thing that really matters to you. You train and you train and you train, and you go through a million iterations of what you think is important, and then you strip it back, and you are very discerning about the people that you run through it with. Again, like your people, making sure that you are with people who are, able to offer you conscious critique. That you have to be discerning about the people that you're going to, perform for, in practice. So that's what comes off the top of my head when I think about that.
Yeah, super helpful. And what I'm also hearing in there too is like, again, it's like the people that you surround yourself with, because if you didn't have those relationships, then you wouldn't have ended up in that room. And you can't do that. That's not one of the kinds of things that you can aim directly at and be like, I'm going to form relationships that are going to get me a TEDx talk. But if you are intentional about your relationships and nurturing relationships, and then with those people, you are intentional about sharing what you actually want and all of that, it's like, there's things that happen that you can't really explain. But you can set it into motion by at least being clear and saying what you want. And
and being in as many rooms as as you can handle. The other thing too is, I think we don't talk about this enough. I would say I'm an extroverted introvert. And so speaking, being able to speak to a lot of people, get my message out in this bigger way, and then being able to retreat, very, very, very important to me. So for some people, that's, this friend, that might not be how they're made up, right? Like, but this is a way that I can really preserve my energy and bring the best that I have to folks.
Speaking of preserving your energy, my final question for you, I'm conscious of the fact that I have only 5 more minutes of your time, is that I'm curious if you ever plan on podcasting again.
Absolutely. Ready enough. Yeah, it's actually simply just going to be called With Tanya Geisler.
Oh, I love it.
I wanted to have the opportunity to be able to cover the myriad of all of the things, entrepreneurship with Tanya Geisler, this conference, like whatever it is. So yeah, it's coming back, baby. It's coming back. Ready Enough served a really valuable and important, it's a really important season for me to amplify some voices, to make sure explicitly clear that I am not the teacher for everyone. I wanted the opportunity for folks to meet Mackenzie Mack, and to meet Desiree Attaway, and to meet other people that have a lived experience of imposter complex that I don't have. That was really important. And then when we tied it up with probably the most perfect interview, which was with Deepa Iyer, all about the different roles that we play inside of social change, which stands the test of time. There was actually nothing more I needed to say after that, because so much of my work is identity based. So how am I showing up to this new crisis? How am I showing up to the pandemic, which is when that was produced? How am I showing up? And that body of work that Deepa Iyer has expressed is just, it stands the test of time. And that to me was like, there was nothing else I wanted to say after that, about that, again, that season. So yeah, I'm coming back, baby. I'm coming back.
I'm so excited to hear it. And I also just love that you had the that you made that decision, like that you knew that that was the right thing to do for you and for your work, because it reminds me of like, you know, when a TV show goes on for like, you like love the show, like it's the best show ever and you're never going to stop watching it. And also it's like, it goes on for so long that it sort of starts to like lose its, which I can't imagine your show having done that. But then there's those shows that are just like, they end at the perfect time and you're like, oh my gosh, how did these showrunners make the decision to end this? Like Succession.
Right.
Succession just ended after what, like, right? And it's like, that show could have continued to be such a popular show, but they were like, nope, we know what we need to do. We're ending it. And it's just, I actually have like goosebumps right now because I'm just like, it's a part of creating that is, I actually think like really important and can make something just so like chef's kiss, like, you know, just so good. And Ready Enough is so good. And I'm very
I would love to say,
I
would love to say that that was all premeditated. It absolutely was not. It really was just like,
yeah.
I
Yeah, but a
that.
lot of people would have gone, no, but the plan was.
Yeah. No.
Do you know what I mean?
No. Yeah. Ain't nobody got time for that. Nobody's got time for that. Nobody's got time for that. Nobody has time for that. No, let's like call the things. And yeah, absolutely. It was the right time. It was the right conversation. That's where I wanted to leave the mark. And now it's been really fun sort of dreaming and scheming into what comes next. And it's, I mean, the talk about your mind maps, where we're going to be taking it is just, it's very delicious. It's also going to be a YouTube channel, which I'm really excited about because I love video.
Yes, I'm so excited. Okay, well, Tanya, I am honored and just, I'm so grateful for the fact that I was like, I'm going to leave Tanya for the end of the people to reach out to. I'm just going to start with the people who I know are like, you know, and look at us. Now you're one of the first episodes for us to launch. And I'm just really honored and I'm really grateful. And this was so much fun. And I'm really happy that we got to do this again.
Thank you for receiving the bat signal. Folks, just remember to ask, get clear what it is you want, and then ask for it. There will be some yeses, there will be some no's, or there will be some silent, but there will be some yeses. There will be some, I am so delighted that you asked for this because we get to do this. So thank you. Thank you, Brooke, for heeding the call. Thank you for doing your work. Thank you for doing your work with the integrity with which you hold your work. And just hold you, and I got a lot of time for you.
Thank you so much, Tanya.